Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Shadow Work 102. We are in week 2. This week, we're going to be discussing money and survival wounds. So, as usual, I know I mentioned it before, but if you all hear any background noises, it's my child. Sometimes it gets a little loud here. So, just bear with me. I try to cut out any extra noise that I can, but it doesn't always work that way. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started. So, just an interesting fact for you, many of us do have financial wounds, some more than others. And research has found that about 20% of the population actually suffers with financial PTSD, which is a severe condition. So, it's not abnormal for someone to have these financial or money wounds. So, what are money wounds? These are past trauma events that revolve around money or different financials. Most of the time it does come from childhood, but it also happens later in our lives. So what causes them? These are events that causes us to worry or experience stress over money. So for example, maybe as a child your parents frequently told you things like money doesn't grow on trees every time you ask for something. Which some parents do just tell you that. But if that just seemed like money was never available for the things that you needed, that definitely will cause you to think that money is really hard to come by. Also, if your utilities are constantly being cut off for non-payment, even as a child, you would have recognized this. But that can be really traumatic. A bankruptcy, that's a huge financial loss. That's very, very traumatic. Or even a sudden loss of employment. That can cause you to have a lot of severe symptoms of this trauma. So how do these money wounds tend to present? Well, a lot of times it's difficulty with managing money. And this could be over or under spending, meaning that some people that have money wounds tend to avoid ever seeing how much money they have. Like if you're one of those people who hates to look at your bank account because you just don't know how much is in there and constantly just don't want to know, there might be something there. But most people will still just keep going out and spending. Or you spend money on kind of useless things that you don't really need. Or maybe you find yourself hoarding your money as often as you can. Like you are a real stickler for spending a penny. You don't want to buy anything in excess, almost to the point of it interrupting your daily life. That it can be really difficult. For example, maybe you grew up in a home where you weren't going to always have, this is a kind of not a silly example, but kind of a light example. But let's say that you grew up in a home where if you were going to a birthday party, you wrapped up a gift in newspaper because that's what you all had. You didn't have gift bags or gift wrap. So now, every holiday, every birthday, if anyone gets a gift, you're keeping those bags. You're trying not to rip that wrapping paper, and you're saving that stuff to reuse it later. There might be something there. Maybe not. Maybe you just like to save a penny. But sometimes it could be from something that has actually wounded you, that you're having trouble with. And obviously, just to be clear, there is something to be said about being smart about your money. So I'm not saying that there's something wrong. I'm just saying that sometimes this has come from something else. And that goes back to the avoidance where I was discussing about not wanting to look at your finances. You don't want to know how much money you have. You're just trying to not even think about it because it does cause you so much stress. But some people with really severe financial PTSD, they might even have nightmares or anxiety. But a lot of people with these type of wounds get really irritated and frustrated in different financial situations. They might start to shut down in conversations. These people tend to not enjoy planning out how your money is going to be dispersed. So for example, if you have a spouse and you like to sit down and plan out where your bills are coming from, and this is a really high point of frustration for them, that might be a sign that they've had some money wounds themselves. So can shadow work and root work help with money wounds? Yes, it absolutely can. It can help manage your symptoms, but just remember that in severe cases, you might need more specialized help, okay? And it's okay to reach out for that. So let's talk about survival wounds. And these wounds are very sad. I mean, all wounds are sad, but these in particular are really sad, especially when they relate to childhood. Survival wounds are past trauma revolving around having enough basic resources like food, water, shelter, or air. And most of these survival wounds are caused in childhood. So let's just give a few examples here. If you lived in a home where food was scarce, or if you had parents who locked up food sources at night, that could make you really insecure about food, about surviving, about having enough. Also, not having access to clean water. And I understand that most of us do not live in third world countries and water is pushed through our plumbing every day, but that actually does not mean that you always have access to clean water. If you don't have a clean cup to drink out of, if you don't have a clean shower to bathe in or tub to bathe in, kind of think outside the box there. Those things also come out to survival. Also, being homeless, not having shelter, that's incredibly traumatic. And that causes a huge wound as well. And some kids have lived through that. But even adults will acquire those survival wounds from being homeless. And when it comes to having enough air, this could be living in a home where it's just really heavy of cigarette smoke or any other air pollution, where you can't get a good deep breath of fresh air. That's not safe and it's not healthy and it can be really traumatic. So how do these survival wounds present themselves? Typically, it's as an overprotection of your current resources when you have them. So sometimes it's overeating or undereating. You might be afraid to eat the last bit of anything because you may not know where your next meal is coming from. But you also may be afraid to not eat as much as you can, just in case there isn't another meal coming. But you also might hoard resources. You might find that you're taking in gallons and gallons of water and just storing them just in case you need them. Anything that is giving you a basic resource, you just find yourself feeling really protective over and you're not willing to sacrifice it. All of this can also present as physical and psychological symptoms as well. Again, back to having anxiety, nightmares, nervousness, depression. There are tons of other things that can be exhibited physically and psychologically that are a symptom of having these type of wounds. So can shadow work and root work help with these survival wounds? Again, it absolutely can. Just like with the money wounds though, some severe cases will require specialized help. So just make sure that you're paying attention to the severity of those wounds for yourself. So how can you begin to heal these type of wounds? First of all, you want to confront them. You want to go back to the original traumatic event. You want to find yourself in that moment. You want to talk to yourself at that point. Have a conversation. Listen to what you're saying to yourself at that point. And you want to start changing those negative thoughts. One thing about your psyche and how your brain functions is that you can change those memories. So go back and try to change the situation for yourself. You're not going to be able to forget it, but try to remember it differently. Try to change the negative thoughts. So, did you struggle with having a food source as a child? Yes, you did. Your parents were not able to provide consistent food for you. And it was hard. It was hard. I want you to change those negative thoughts. Just to be clear, I know that it is not a positive thing. I'm not telling you that what you went through was okay because put a silver lining on it. I'm not saying that. If you went through something like that as a child, it breaks my heart. I hate to think of children experiencing that or adults experiencing that. Anyone going hungry or without shelter or water, any of that. That is very hard. I'm not saying that you're going to be able to just breeze over it and just forget that it happened. Just for your own psychological health, talk to yourself about how it's okay. You were strong enough that you got through it. And now you're better. Now you do this because you went through it. You have to put a positive spin on it just so that you feel better. But even when you do, those symptoms are not going to always go away. It's still going to happen. You're still going to have a moment where, you've got this bill coming up and you know that money's tight, but you just don't want to face it. You just want to ignore it because you're not really sure how you're going to cope with it. You're not really sure where the money's going to come from. Instead of running from it, what we need to learn to do is to cope with those symptoms. Let's learn to cope with that fear and that frustration, that anger, the stress. Let's learn to deal with it and get past it so that you can confront the problem you're actually having. Because having all of this anger and frustration over any of these wounds is only prohibiting you from moving forward and doing better in your life. So it's about learning to cope and manage better so that you can get through and be happier, be more accepting of what you've gone through. But also this shadow work and root work process, even journaling, if you prefer to call it that, this is going to be incredibly therapeutic for you. Sometimes just getting that out of you. Sometimes people haven't told anyone. No one may know what you went through. But getting it out, stop harboring all of that inside you. You can't do that. You can't live that way. Let it all out. And sometimes getting it out and seeing it on paper and letting it go is incredibly therapeutic. With all that being said, some cases may still need CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. You might need to see a therapist or a licensed psychiatrist, someone that can really help you with this. And if that is the case, do not be ashamed of that. Because everyone needs help sometimes. You have to reach out for help when you need it. And you are the only person who is going to be able to reach out for help for you. You have to take care of yourself. So if you need it, reach out for it. This process will help you. The shadow work and root work process, it is helpful, but it's not always what everyone needs. You may need more, and that's totally okay. All right, let's talk about your homework questions. Were you surprised to find out that you could have trauma, wounds, or PTSD from money or survival? I think it surprises people because you don't really think about that when you think about what you've experienced and what has affected you so much that it's kind of being pushed down in you because you just don't want to face it. We don't always think about money when it comes to that. We don't think about survival all the time, So without giving any details, have you experienced any of these types of trauma in your life? And if you have, do you find that you struggle with those wounds now? After we've talked about how that can outwardly display from you, do you find that that's happening with you? And again, you don't have to give us any details about what happened if you don't want to, but just kind of give us a rough overview if you have been affected by that. Okay, that's actually all that I have for you this week. So if you all have any questions about anything, please feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, I will catch up with you all next week. Bye.